Okay.
So, assuming the Supreme Court votes on the ACA as planned right after the election, where do the Democrats then go from there? And either one of you.
You go first,
You
Jeanne.
go first.
It's your say. Okay. Well, first of all, we don't know how they're going to vote. We have a strong argument, and we're really concerned about this nominee. Very concerned. But if they throw out the whole Affordable Care Act, we're going to have to fix it legislatively. We'll have to pass something. If they throw out part of it, we'll have to see what we can do to fix that. I think the big issue right in front of us right now, though, is that people have to vote like their life depends on it. That's what Michelle Obama said. That was her advice. And I think it's really good advice because the Affordable Care Act's at risk. Also, all the work we want to do to make it better, which is all of Jeanne's bills on things like pharmaceuticals and making it less expensive for people to be able to afford prescription drugs. We can make that Affordable Care Act better, but not if they throw it out.
There's been talk about expanding.
Well, we don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do. We have a pretty good idea based on what they have said about it, and we know what's at stake in terms of people's coverage. And here in New Hampshire, with the expansion of Medicaid, if that goes away, and people should understand, if they overturn the entire Affordable Care Act, that goes away too. And for the thousands of people who are getting treatment for substance use disorders, their treatment goes away. So there is a lot at stake here, and depending on what the court does, we need to take action in Washington. I hope that states will also consider taking action to ensure that they help with the cost of coverage, that they look at what insurance companies are doing with respect to coverage, and that there is a real effort across the country to address any action the Supreme Court might take. And in the short term, as Senator Klobuchar says, hopefully everybody's going to get out and vote.
There's been talk about potentially expanding the court if Democrats get picked back to the Senate. Do you have any comment on that?
I've always been open to looking at reform on all levels, but I think right now the focus is on voting. The focus is on this election. And we have so much work to do in the first 100 days, it's not even funny. I think Joe Biden's going to win, and we will be able to have a cabinet that knows what they're doing. We're going to have to do immediate work on getting testing out and making sure we've got the vaccine plan so when the vaccine comes, it gets distributed. So that is my focus.
Do you think the results will be on November 3rd, or do you think it'll be later that we'll have the results?
Well, there are a number of states that have a lot of absentee ballots to count, so we may not know everything on November the 3rd. We may not know who's won for president. Hopefully we will know in New Hampshire. And I think what's important is for people to wait and let that vote count be determined, and not to have either of the candidates for president declare victory until every vote is counted.
Senator Shaheen, do you have any comment on the potential removal of the filibuster or any court expansion if the majority?
What I've said is that I don't support packing the court. I do think there are reforms that should be looked at with respect to the Supreme Court. We know that ethics has sometimes been an issue with some of the justices accepting travel that is worth a lot, accepting gifts. I think that's not appropriate, and I hope they have not seemed to be able to address those kinds of ethical issues internally. So I think there are things that can be looked at that hopefully could improve the operations of the court. And what's at stake here, and this is what's so important, is an eroding of the credibility of the American people in our institutions of democracy, and the Supreme Court is fundamental to that. The rule of law is fundamental to that. And if people believe that the Supreme Court is politicized in ways that affect the outcome of their decisions, that is very bad for democracy, and it undermines our country.
And I just want to add to that. One is that Vice President Biden has suggested a commission at getting some of the issues that Jeanne just talked about. So I think that's something to look at. Secondly, the only person that's packed the court is Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell by disregarding the precedent that they set about when there is an opening in an election year. And then your question on the states, I think we just did a report on this that I led with Bernie and a few other people about what to expect on election night. And New Hampshire is one of the states that is going to count their ballots and will most likely know the results. But there are states that don't even start counting. They have, maybe their ballots can come in 3, 4, 5 days later. That's fine as long as they're postmarked by the election. But New York and Alaska, for instance, don't even start counting until after the ballots are received. So you're going to have states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin that are toward the end. Wisconsin isn't opening one ballot until Election Day, and they start at 5 a.m. And they have all these mail-in ballots. So some of the states we're going to know. Florida's actually early because they get their ballots early and then they count them early. And then some of the states we're not going to know till later. That doesn't mean we won't know the winner in the presidential. We may. I think we will because it's looking so good. But I think people should be ready to understand that it's okay if we don't know every state on election night. There's nothing wrong. It doesn't mean something bad happened. It's just that it takes a while to count the ballots in some states, and people are going to have to be patient.
Have senators gotten together at all, privately or otherwise, to discuss what you all will do if Donald Trump does not leave the White House in a peaceful way?
I have not been part of any discussions like that, and I'm not aware of any. I'm assuming that based on the history of this country, that regardless of what Donald Trump has said about being willing to accept a peaceful transition of power or not, that he's going to leave if he loses.
And I also think you've seen Republican leaders across the country being very firm about that, about the peaceful transition of power, that they strongly support it. You've also seen Republican governors and senators like Mitt Romney defending mail-in ballots, defending our democracy. You see people like DeWine in Ohio. You've seen a number of governors and senators that are taking a different tack than Donald Trump. And so that all leads me to this conclusion that we've got a process set up with the Electoral College, with the way this all works, and that will be followed. And no matter what Donald Trump says in his tweets.
And Senator Shaheen, what do you want people to know about down ballot races in New Hampshire besides the gerrymandering?
That they're very important. Too often people stop at the top races, either at president and then don't vote for any of the other offices, or they stop after the federal offices and the governor and they don't vote for down ballot races. And those down ballot races are really critical. Who gets elected, not just at the federal level, but in the state, determines so many things that are really important to people of the state. What happens with taxation here in New Hampshire, what happens with support for social services, health care is important at the state level as well, our response to the coronavirus. All of those things are also determined by who gets elected to the legislature and to county offices. So it's really important for people to vote up and down the ticket.
We have time for one more question.
Senator, this is a little parochial, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What did you think? You're very proud of Minnesota. What did you think of the New Hampshire primary and how you finished it?
Oh, well, I just love the New Hampshire primary. No, I think one of the good things, I think the issues that we had in Iowa with the caucuses and the counting of the numbers, and it really isn't fair to blame the whole state for that. It's the caucuses are a really difficult thing. We actually in Minnesota, for presidential level, we had gotten rid of them on the presidential level, and I think that worked out much better for our state on Super Tuesday. We kept them in place for other things, but we do not have them at the presidential level. And I think that was going to a primary, for me, just made it easier for people to vote, people who might not be able to show up at a caucus, or people who maybe didn't want to be on TV in a caucus room and they just want to go in and vote. So I liked that part of it, that it was a primary. Secondly, I liked the way the people of New Hampshire welcomed you into their homes and their backyards, and the way that we had civil debates. I thought that I personally very much liked the debate in New Hampshire with Jeanne Shaheen sitting in the front row on top of a hockey rink. I thought that the debates that we had, not just the big debate that we did in New Hampshire, but the other events as well. How voters expected to get answers to questions, how they never gave you the easy way out, and they'd ask the tough questions. I thought all of that is really important to our democracy, that we don't just have it be about who can spend the most money on ads. And I think it's a tradition that should continue. And we'll see what order we put, what happens with this caucus in Iowa and all of that. But I hope that that New Hampshire continues to have a role as an early state.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think what Senator Klobuchar said is one of the most important reasons why the New Hampshire primary is going to continue, because candidates like it, reporters like it, and the voters here are very engaged with everybody who comes through and asks tough questions and provides support. And you can't win here just by having the most ads on television. So I think that's why we're going to see it continue.
And I think also having states like South Carolina and some of the other states that we've had that are smaller states. I think Nevada also had a bad experience with the caucus, but it's still an example of a very diverse state where you could have conversions to primaries and things like that in some of the other states. And I think there's been a lot of talk there about that as well. So the great news about New Hampshire is you actually counted your votes. So excellent.